Hello, Ashley here with HeartHookHome.com, and today is the day for part one of the Painted Canyon Cardigan Crochet Along. The Painted Canyon Cardigan is one of my most popular designs on HeartHookHome.com, and it's a lot of fun. It's so much easier to crochet than it looks. If this is your first time crocheting a cardigan, you are in the perfect place. You're in great hands. This is going to be fun. For this, we are using half double crochet throughout the entire cardigan with a few exceptions for the edging stitches and sewing on the pockets, etc. But we are together going to learn how to crochet the torso of the cardigan and then how to create the armholes, how to sew the shoulders together. Then we're going to crochet the hood, add the edging, add the sleeves, add the pockets, and it's going to be awesome. You are going to learn a lot of different skill sets with this crochet along. So there will be 4 parts to this crochet along, and this is part 1. For this cardigan, I am making the 2-3T size. No matter what size you are making of this pattern, whether it's the smallest size, which is the 6-month size, all the way up to the adult 5XL, you will be able to use these video tutorials, this series of videos, to get you through any aspect if you get stuck in the pattern at all. So if this is your first cardigan to date, you are in excellent hands, and we are going to have so much fun. Obviously, for my cardigan, I am making the 2-3T size, and I am using Bravo worsted weight yarn from We Crochet. This is the Dove Heather colorway, and this is the Avocado colorway. I'm making this for a friend's little boy, so I thought that the gray would look great for the body, and the green is going to look great for the edging. So let's go ahead and get started. I do recommend having the pattern size that you are making in front of you so that you can reference the stitch counts while I reference the stitch counts that are in the 2-3T size that I will be making today. Starting with the J 6mm hook, the very first thing you want to do when you are preparing to make the Painted Canyon cardigan is to check your gauge. This is with any cardigan, any wearable, any crochet in general, but specifically when you're making cardigans, you need to make sure that the size of your stitches match the size of my stitches. So the gauge pattern on the Painted Canyon cardigan says that in 4 inches width, I should have 11 stitches. And then in height, I should have 10 rows in 4 inches of height. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work up a small square that is about the size of, 4 inches square, and I'm going to measure that and make sure that my stitches are in fact the correct size and that my hook size does not need to be adjusted. So in order to do that, I'm going to just do a chain of 15. I'm going to do a half double crochet in the second chain from the hook, so this one right here, and then all the way down the row, half double crochet in each of these chains. And since I did a chain of 15 and I went into the second chain from the hook, that means that at the end of this row I'm going to have 14 half double crochet stitches. You always want to have more stitches in your gauge swatch than what is stated in the actual gauge measurement, because when you count your stitches, you don't want to count the outside 2 stitches because those are different. They're a little bit differently shaped, and so it can skew your gauge just a little bit, ever so slightly, if you do count those outside stitches. So we are going to do 14 instead of the recommended 11. So that we're not counting those when we do our measurement. So here are 14 half double crochet stitches. Now I'm going to do a total of 10 rows so that we can make sure that this ends up being exactly the 4 inches square. I'm going to add some more rows here. So here we are starting row 10 of our gauge swatch, and then as soon as I'm finished with this row, we will measure it and make sure that our stitches are the same size as each other's. So you definitely want to make sure that your stitches are the same size as mine. Finishing up row 10 here. All right, so here we have a lovely little gauge swatch. Let me zoom in All right, here is our gauge swatch. So here we have 14 half double crochets wide and we have 10 rows of half double crochet stitches. In order to count your gauge, you're going to take your measuring tool and you're going to line it up against the left side of one of your stitches over here. Not the outside stitch, but just one of these on the inside here. So I'm going to lay this right here. And what we are going to do is we are going to count how many stitches are between the end of our ruler over here and then the 4 inches mark right here. So we're going to count all of the stitches that are in between there, and hopefully yours is 11, as is mine. So here we go. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 stitches. So perfect. So this means that if I crochet the exact number of stitches as you do, that our pieces are going to turn out the same size. Now, if I twist this sideways, this is rows. If I lay my ruler on top of here, it should be exactly 4 inches tall. So this gauge swatch looks perfect. That means that we are ready to start on part 1 of the Painted Canyon Cardigan Crochet Along. First off, I do recommend having the pattern printed for the size that you will be making. I, in this video, am making a 2-3T size, so I will be following the stitch counts for that size. If you're making any size from the 6-month up to the 5XL in adult, just make sure that you have your pattern handy and that you can reference it when I give specific stitch counts that pertain to this size only. To start the Painted Canyon Cardigan, we are going to start with our slip knot. We are starting from the bottom hem and we are working our way up to the armpits, and this is what we are working for part 1. At the end of part 1, you will have one rectangle and that is it, and then we will start on part 2 together. So the very first thing I'm going to do is a foundation half double crochet row. This is a row of literally foundation half double crochets. If you are unfamiliar with this stitch, you are perfectly fine chaining the number designated on your size of the pattern and then half double crocheting back through, and your row 1 will end up looking about the same as mine. For my foundation half double crochet, I'm going to chain 2. I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to insert my hook in the very first chain that I made. So the second chain from the hook. I'm going to pull up a loop, and now I've got these 3 loops on my hook. I'm going to yarn over and pull through just one of those loops. And now I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops. And that is a foundation half double crochet. Let's do that again. Yarn over. Now we're going to go into the top of this stitch here. So you're going to grab both sides of that V. You're going to go underneath both sides of that V. Pull up a loop like this. So now you have 3 loops left on your hook. You're going to yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through all of them. Yarn over, go under both sides of that V, which is now technically the bottom of your stitch. Pull up a loop. You've got your 3, yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through all of them. We're going to keep doing this until we have the designated number of foundation half double crochet stitches. You do not have to use this method. If you are unfamiliar with foundation stitches, you can definitely chain the desired number or the designated number for your size. I do give alternate instructions. So I am making, for the size 2-3T, I am making a foundation half double crochet of 68 stitches. So I'm going to do this a total of 68 times, and that is going to be the width of my entire cardigan. So here I have my 68 stitches, and this is the width needed for the 2-3T size. Almost perfectly fits in my camera frame. So now we are ready to start row 2. So for row 2, through the torso rows, this is going to be completely up until the armpits. Right at the armpits is where we're going to stop for part 1. So in order to do that, let me zoom in a little bit. We are going to chain 1 and turn so that we're looking at the back side of our stitches. We are going to half double crochet in the first stitch, the second stitch, the third stitch, the fourth stitch, all the way to the end of the row. So for your rows for mine, for this size, for the 2-3T size, I am going to do 32 rows total of straight up half double crochets. That is it. The only thing that I caution you here is at the end of this portion, we will have a rectangle, right? And you can see I'm just doing half double crochets. I'm just going to do this all the way to the end of the row. But when I get done with this part, we are going to have a large rectangle. The most important thing, especially if you are new to crocheting in general, is to make sure that, especially at the end of every row, that you make sure that you have the correct number of stitches. You always want to maintain your stitch count so that your sides don't go wonky or start going in towards the center. So I am literally just crocheting half double crochets. I'm going to work these all the way to the end of the row. When we get to the end of the row, I'm going to make sure that you know exactly where to place that last stitch. Since we went into the very first stitch of the row here, which we will do every row, you want to make sure that you end appropriately as well. So let's just continue making our half double crochets all the way to the end of this row. Here I am reaching the end of my stitches. And this is the foundation, this is the first foundation stitch that I made here. If you did your chain and go back through, you're still going to want to make sure that you're going into the very last of your stitches right here. So I'm going to do my last half double crochet right under that last stitch. And now I would want to count my stitches and make sure that I still have 68 on round 2. And you'll notice that mine kind of looks like a curly Q. If yours does that too, it's perfectly fine. It's going to straighten out once we add a few more rows. So it is absolutely perfectly fine that you have a little curly Q going on here. And we are ready to continue on. For the next row, for row 3, my goodness, I'm going to chain 1 and turn. And now I'm going to do the same exact thing that I just did. I'm going to place my first half double crochet right here in this very first stitch. And then my last half double crochet of the row, I'm going to place in this stitch right here. So I'm going to continue crocheting my rows. For the 2-3T size, I need to have a total of 32 rows. So I've got 2 here, I'm going to do 30 more, and then we'll catch up together and we'll talk about part 2. All right, here is my completed part 1 of the Painted Canyon crochet along. This is 32 rows of solid half double crochet. Remember, this is the 2-3T size, so whatever size you're making, you are going to have a large rectangle that looks just like this. The number of stitches in your width is dependent on the size that you are making, and the number of rows here that you do is how tall it will be from the armpit to the bottom hem. So if you're particularly tall and you need to add more rows, you would do that to this part right here. You would do them before we start the armholes so that it would hang lower on the legs, on the bum. If you need it to be shorter, say if you're on the super short side, then you could remove rows from this portion. If you need to check the length on yourself or on your child, you would simply just hold this up under their underarms and see where the back it hits right here, how far down that hits on their legs or body or on their bum. So if you're going to adjust the height of the pattern, this is where you do it, at this section right where we are here. Now, I wanted to also talk to you a bit about counting your rows. If you're brand new to crochet, you might be having difficulty counting your rows here of how many rows do I actually have. So we're going to count my rows together. Let me zoom in. When I am counting rows in crochet, I'm going to flip it over here. I like to start, obviously, at the very bottom. You got to start at one end or the other, right? So this is my first row right here. This is that foundation half double crochet row that we did earlier. This one that's going into that is row 2. And at the top of row 2 here, let me get a pencil, you can see that I have this ridge, right? This ridge that goes all the way across my piece. That is the top of row 2. So if you always look for these ridges, that will tell you this is 2 rows, this is 4 rows, this is 6 rows, 8, 10, etc. So when I'm counting half double crochet specifically, that is what I'm looking for. Is I'm looking for this ridge right here, and that tells me exactly how many. That's 2 rows. Every time I see a ridge, that is another 2 rows of half double crochet. So if that helps you counting your rows, I hope it does. And we are ready to prepare for part 2. In part 2 of the Painted Canyon Crochet Along, we are going to add the armholes. So what we're doing next is we're going to, let me put a stitch marker in here so that I don't lose my place. And then we are also going to look at the pattern for the specific size that you're making. And we're going to find where it says mark so many stitches in for your armholes. And all I mean by that is that I want you to take your stitch markers and I want you to count for however many it says for your size. For the 2-3T that I am making here, I need to put a stitch marker in the 20th stitch. So I'm going to count that out and put a stitch marker. Perfect. So for the 2-3T size, I needed to have 20 stitches before my stitch marker, at my stitch marker. That is 20. So now on the other side, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to count 20 stitches from the outside. Right here. That is my 20th stitch. So now I'm going to put a stitch marker in that guy. And we will be completely finished with part 1 and ready to start part 2. So what we have here is, let me move everything out of the way. Yours should look exactly like mine, perhaps in a different size. So we've got our nice rectangle here. We've got our left edge and 20 stitches in. We've got our right edge and 20 stitches in. This is going to be the back of your cardigan. These are going to be the 2 fronts that we fold in like this. So your cardigan is going to look like this when we're done. Don't do that yet. We're not ready for that part yet. First, we've got to crochet the panels, which will be in part 2. So in part 2, we will make the panels together and we will sew our shoulders together, and we are going to have so much fun. I will look forward to seeing you next time for part 2 of the Painted Canyon Cardigan Crochet Along.